in this second session that I'm running in the series, today's session is about burnout, and especially burnout among change makers, people who daily, as a profession, work on social, environmental, or economic or other change. And this is a group that is in many ways particularly vulnerable to burnout. I know this group well. I've been working on that type of change myself, so this is particularly important also to me, and that's why this webinar. Before we jump into the actual topic, I wanted to share a little bit of the organizational aspects of the webinar. And so our plan for today is this. We will start off with some definitions, discussing the dimensions of burnout. What are some of the things by which you can tell that you're actually at risk? What are some of the key risk factors, both within your control and outside your control, that might be contributing to the risk of burnout for yourself? As a practical tool for both, I will also be sharing two templates, or actually one template and one questionnaire. I'll be sharing the details as we go through it. In terms of housekeeping, the most important thing is that this is an educational webinar. This is not meant as a therapy, a psychotherapy. If at any point you feel that this is something that you might need, please consult a licensed professional for that. This is, again, purely for educational and empowering purposes. Other than that, just come as you are. You can come in and out and share whatever you want throughout this session. You might have noticed that it's being recorded, but I will make sure not to include your name or your video in the recording that I share later on. So don't worry about this aspect of showing up. Also, if you have way to do this, I would encourage you to turn off any distractions, any social media, mail, or your phone, so that you can fully focus and also do a little bit of an introspection as we go through this session. One final practical thing that I wanted to share is that as we go through the webinar, there are some theoretical things, but as I also mentioned, there are practical aspects or practical exercises that I would invite you to do. And in order to do that, I'm sharing with you a digital template that I've prepared for you. This template will allow you to create, in a sense, your own anti-burnout protocol. There's a instruction that I'll also be sharing in this particular session. I'm sharing it in the chat right now. Is in the link in the chat right now, but I will also be sharing this together with the recording that you might be seeing after the session itself. So don't worry, there's nothing that you will lose by not being live in this session. And so before we jump into the theory, I hinted towards it at the very beginning. I wanted to begin with a little bit of a story, a personal story that takes place in 2019. So at this point, it's 6 full years ago, six years and 2 months even. And so in 2019, I felt as if I was on top of the world, and in many ways, in my professional life, I was. I was invited to speak on stages in many different places around the world, in Canada, in France, in Italy, in Poland. I was working actively with many cities. At that point, my focus was mostly urban development and urban foresight. I was awarded recently for my contributions to creating participatory foresight methodologies. I mean, it was a ton of things. It was a lot of, it was also doing things that in many ways were simply adding to the excitement and adding to the sensation that I'm actually doing well. But unfortunately, I wasn't doing fully well. This is the other side of the coin that you rarely see, right? And at that point in 2019, I was burning out, and I was burning out fast. I was losing sleep. I couldn't really restore any energy. I had actual physical problems. Then I was diagnosed with a benign cancer. So there was a lot that was going on in the backstage that I tried to almost deny that it existed, to the extent that when I was preparing that presentation and I was trying to look for pictures from 2019 that would also show that side of my life, these are the only two that I could find. I just denied that things were, that it was simply too much and that I was burning out. And so towards the end of 2019, my company was doing really well. It was the fifth year of me building a urban development, urban foresight consultancy. I had 4 colleagues that I was finally able to pay well. And so one of the things that was also in front of me at the end of 2019 was the contract that would allow me to further grow the team and sustain the business for the next 3 years. So it was a lot. It was going the right direction. And at the same time, in December, I was done. I was spent. And at some point, I just hit the wall and I said, that's it. I had to close the business. That was the toughest decision I've done thus far. I had to say goodbye to my colleagues. They had to go their own ways. And everything that I had built up until that moment had to be closed and had to be put on hold. And so that is something that I don't ever want to happen to you. This is something that is preventable. We need to know how, we need to know the risk factors, we need to know how to really take care of ourselves. And that's, as I mentioned, that's why I'm doing also this webinar. That's why I'm sharing all of these things. And I will continue to share them not only throughout this year, but hopefully beyond. And so with that, I wanted to switch to the more theoretical side of things so that we're on the same page in terms of what does burnout actually mean, what it consists of, and what are some of the risk factors that contribute to your individual risk of burning out. Now, first, when we look at the definition and the 4 core elements of burnout, these are the following. So first of all, it's this feeling of exhaustion. And not just being tired in the morning. It's your actual inability to recover. Even if there's something that doesn't require that much energy or didn't used to require that much energy for you to do, now it's overwhelming. You're pretty much drained of energy all throughout the day, regardless of how much you slept the night before. And very often you might also experience difficulties in sustaining healthy sleep. So that's one, this feeling of exhaustion. Second one is emotional impairment. So that means that even if generally you don't react abruptly to stressful situations, you're not super reactive, your emotions are relatively stable, when you're burnt out or when you're approaching that state, your emotions are way more difficult to handle. They are way more difficult to control. They might change very often, and you're way more reactive. So small things might trigger a very significant emotional response from you, which might not have been typical for you previously. And maybe just a quick side note, I'm making these references to you before and during the burning out process because we always need to measure our own responses and our own abilities against the sort of more healthy normal selves. These benchmarks will be different for different people. There's no one universal, say, time to react to stressful situations for everyone. So you always need to be thinking about your own benchmark. And so emotional impairment, as I mentioned, is the second element in the burnout collection. The third one is cognitive impairment. And this means that you have difficulties processing information, remembering information, sustaining conversation, executing tasks that, again, previously were not a problem for you. Maybe even simple things, writing an email with a summary of a discussion, a conversation that you just had online with your colleague used to be no issue. You have difficulties remembering what you actually agreed upon, what you discussed. Were there any tasks to follow up on? Simply your brain does not operate as it used to. It feels slow. It feels scattered. So that's the third thing to look for when we're discussing burnout. And then the fourth one is mental distance. And so mental distance means that you're almost becoming cynical. Actually, in the previous definitions of burnout, it was called cynicism. And it's the state in which you're no longer fully engaged in what you're doing. You're no longer hopeful, excited. You're no longer fully submerged in whatever it is that you're doing professionally. There is a buffer in between you and the work, and it's not this healthy buffer of balance, but it's a bitter distance that you're building towards your job and your work. And so when you put these four things together, this is when we are actually discussing burnout. There are two additional factors that are not specific to burnout. They are connected with almost with consequences of what we just discussed. So this might be your body having difficulties unwinding, or you might have difficulties falling asleep, or you can have other psychosomatic effects of this state going on for way too long. Now, when we think of that, we might want to check or ask a question about what is it that actually causes this type of difficult and draining state. And so in psychology, in the theories also that I'm sharing with you today, there is this notion of the chronic imbalance between what you get in and what you give out. And it's the imbalance between the job demands that might be putting a pressure on you and the job and personal resources that you might have to counteract them and counteract the job demands. And so now I'll walk you through each of these categories, showing you what type of negative signals you might want to look for in terms of your professional context. And then we'll talk about working with them or actually against them in many ways. And so the first thing is job demands. If your work is putting on you a lot of pressure in terms of the amount of things that you have to do, there's just a huge quantity of workloads that you have on you day in and day out. That's one of the things that contributes to burnout. Second one is time pressure. If it's always go, 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 and there is no downtime, there are no down periods throughout the year, then that's also something that puts additional strain on you. And naturally, there are periods in the year when we work extremely fast. There's high time pressure. We have a lot to do. End of the year is often that time of the year. But if it's just, I don't know, a few weeks, a couple of months maybe, then it's manageable for you. Then you can have a slower time afterward and recover. And you know it's not something that is constant. If it is constant, however, this is something that is additionally taxing. The third thing is emotional demands. And this is one of the reasons why our work is particularly at risk when it comes to burnout. Any type of service jobs, any type of jobs that require this emotional dissonance are very taxing. And when I say emotional dissonance, I mean you need to, in your work, in your contacts with your partners, with different stakeholders, you need to keep a very happy, optimistic appearance. Your work, in a way, requires you to show optimism, to smile a lot, to be outgoing, right? Regardless of how you feel inside. So even if you woke up feeling miserable, your job requires you to actually smile and be happy, at least appearing to be happy towards your stakeholders, your patients, your customers, whoever that might be, right? Depending on your work. And as you can hear, in the work of social or environmental change makers, this is something that might often be a demand. Now, the next risk is role conflict and role ambiguity, and that's another one that is quite typical to our work. And that means that in your job, you're pretty much expected to do things that are outside of your typical work description. You are expected to cover tasks for other people. You are expected to come up with things that will solve problems, but you need to do them, right? So if there's role ambiguity, you don't know what is your job and what isn't your job, then that contributes to the stress levels and it creates additional tension. Also, if there's a conflict in your roles across your team, that then again adds the pressure. Fifth risk factor in terms of job demands is called work-home interference. And that pretty much means that your work spills over into your home, into your family life. That might mean that you're staying over hours, right? The simplest thing that we often do. But that might also mean that when you come home, even on time, you haven't really mentally left your work. You spend the evening or the morning thinking and talking to, say, your partner about the difficult things that are happening at work. And when it spills over, when it interferes with your home life, when it actually creates additional problems for you at home, then it definitely should be considered another risk factor in terms of burning out. And then finally, stressful or critical events at work. So as you can see, the first five ones were more about chronic states. This final one is more about acute situation. So something abrupt happened. Like last year, many colleagues have lost their jobs during just one day abruptly without any warning, right? And so this type of situations is also something that contributes to burnout. And so that's the first category that we need to consider when discussing this condition. And sometimes you might say, well, I'm not hired by anybody. I'm not working, for a big organization or an NGO. I just work for myself. Well, that's all great as long as you're a good boss. I wasn't. I wasn't a good boss to myself. And so from that perspective, even if you're not working in a team, you're not a full-time employee or of any organization, these risks that we just discussed, they might still be applicable to you because in that situation, when you're a consultant, a freelancer, you're your own boss, and that can also be quite tricky. Now, the second category is job resources. These job resources in this section, they are mentioned as something positive, something that you should have. And so these resources are something that if we're lacking, we should actually be working actively to get more of. And so the first one is job control or autonomy. This is the need for you to actually feel that you can make your own decisions at work. And by your own decisions, I mean decisions about how you do your work. What's the timeline for your work? Of course, agreed with the general project. Who you do your work with, right? So you are able to actually make decisions that have direct impact on your daily work. If you're missing that again is a stress factor. Second point, extremely important, is social support. That means social support with your colleagues, but it might also mean from your supervisor or supervisors. Social support in this context means that you're building a sense of camaraderie and support, peer support, that you're able to vent with someone, right? And that you're able to actually feel that there's somebody who understands you. Sure, your partner might be able to listen to what you're going through, but they will not or they might not be able to understand the intimate details of your experience. Third thing is performance feedback. So think of it as information that you need in order to know if you're doing well. Because if you're in a situation in which you're constantly worried that you're not doing something right, that you get no feedback, and then this might be stressful, even if it's not on the surface, then underneath, it might be creating additional unnecessary tension. Now, next one is opportunities for learning and development. So basically, your belief that you're not stuck in some dead end position from which you have no progress upwards. This is tied to the next one, next point, that is career opportunities or prospects. That might mean career opportunities also outside the organization that you're currently working in. But this sense of progression, development, hope is critical for you to actually maintain a healthy outlook on your professional life. And then finally, organizational support and for HR practices. I mean, we've all seen it. There are toxic organizations. There's mobbing in organizations. If there's anything that crosses the line, anything that interferes with your personal boundaries, there has to be a protocol for you to deal with it, be that HR practices, be that your supervisor support, whatever that might be. But this is also something that you need to really ensure that you have in order to prevent burnout. And then the last section, again, shown from this positive side. So what you actually need is the section around personal resources. This section is tricky because this section is very much about who you are as a person. So initially you might think that there might not be too many things that you can do about them. But trust me, we can practice pretty much anything if we're not born with it. And so here are a few points that I'll mention. First one is the belief that I am capable, that if I set myself to achieve any goal, accomplish any task, that I'm actually able to do it. And if I'm not able to do it immediately, then that I am able to learn how to do it in time. So this belief in self-efficacy is something that is really strengthening your core. Second one is optimism and hope. And you can see how it's very closely related one to the other. Even if you're pessimistic by design, by nature, practicing optimism, practicing hope is something that is very important in burnout prevention and generally in well-being. This might require some cognitive realignment, some therapy, maybe some mindful practices that allow you to catch yourself thinking pessimistically about something and then try to rewrite the script. This takes practice, but it's possible to shift your outlook on life at least a few inches, and these few inches will also matter. The third point is resilience, and that means practicing or equipping yourself with ways in which you can actually adapt and recover. Things happen, crises happen. We know that in our lives and in our professional lives, there will be instances in which there will be something that will knock us down. Resilience means that we're able to then recover, stand up, and continue, or maybe even draw from the experience. Now, resilience is something that, again, can be trained. I myself had some very difficult experiences in the last couple of years. And this is where I started looking into and researching resilience building practices. And I must say, there's plenty of them. And so I would very much encourage you to also look into that aspect of your professional and also personal life. Fourth element that is in the personal resources bucket is your self-esteem. And here we're talking about self-esteem that is related to your work, right? So this conviction and this feel being good at what you're doing, of being a valuable member of your team, of being a solid contributor to whatever your organization or your particular job is designed for. And finally, the fifth point is mindfulness. It's very much about the practice of not running from the moment, not running away from the moment, of actually recognizing the moment in which you are, recognizing the feelings that you're having, recognizing the reactions that your body might be having, keeping peace with them, and then going from there, right? So mindful practices are also something that would be in the bucket of your personal resources. And on the other side of the coin, if you're missing this type of an approach and skill, a muscle almost, then this might again contribute as a risk factor to your potential burnout. And so to sum it up, we had the bucket of job demands, of work demands, that listed several things that are risk factors straight up. And then we had two buckets of job resources and personal resources, with the things that you would need to have in order to be, I don't want to say fully immune, but in order for your burnout risk to be lower. And if you're missing any of these, then that's something that increases the risk of you actually burning out. And so now I wanted to invite you to two resources that I will share with you. The very first one is a questionnaire. It's a burnout assessment tool. It's a questionnaire that was designed by the same guy who created the theory that I just shared with you. Now, this questionnaire, as you can see, is divided into questions that refer to each of the 4 symptoms of burnout. So there are questions about exhaustion, questions about mental dissonance, and so on and so forth, emotional impairment, cognitive impairment. The way to, and I'll share the link in just a second, the way to fill it in is to basically go sentence by sentence and assess how often you're experiencing this thing, right? So as you can see in the instruction, the following statements are related to your work situation, right? And how you experience this situation. Please state how often each statement applies to you. Now, once you fill this in, here you have the scoring rules. So let's imagine a situation in which, at work, I feel mentally exhausted. You marked rarely. In this instance, you're counting 2 points for that particular statement. Okay? And as you go through each section, you count the average for each section, the average points for each of these sections. Now, 2 things I wanted to say. One, this is only a questionnaire. So sure, it's helpful. It's actually very good, but it's helpful in trying to see how far you're on the burnout spectrum, how much at risk you are, right? But this is not the sufficient diagnostic tool for burnout. If after you finish it, if you see that, if you get worried, this is the moment when you should go and see a specialist, and they will be able to carry on, do the final diagnosis, and support you in whatever way you might need. So please don't treat it as the final answer to a question, am I already burned out and am I at high risk of being burnt out? And how will you be able to tell? Well, I've added here on the slide the norms. These are the norms for, I think, European Outlanders, some European reference group, right? I will share the link to all of the questionnaires in the sense that they are in different languages. So you will be able to also see on the website other norms, other reference points. But just for the sake of clarity, I wanted to show you how to read them and how to understand them. And so here you can see the titles of the sections that you have in the questionnaire. So for example, the first section was exhaustion. And here you have X for exhaustion. Here, this is also explained at the bottom. And you can see that if your average for the statements for exhaustion was under 1.75, then your burnout score is low in this particular section, right? If, say, it was higher than 3.75, then it's very high. And in that way, you can go section by section, but also in the end, you can count the average for all of the 4 sections and get your overall burnout. And so, as promised, I will now put in the chat the link to the website. This is the original website from the scholars that actually are working on this topic. So I would encourage you to go to this website, find the questionnaire, preferably in your own language. And there are quite many languages or quite many linguistic versions of this questionnaire already provided on the site. However, if you're not able to find your own language, then simply use the English version, because that's the also most tested and most universal one. And so that's that's I would share with you. And of course, this takes time. This requires some reflection. So I will not ask you to do it now. Take a moment to fill it in. And when you do, if you prefer to do it, then there's one other thing that I wanted to share with you, and that's the anti-burnout protocol. That would be your own anti-burnout protocol. And so first, let me again put it in the chat. I already did that once, but I think some people came and some left. So just in case, sharing it again. The template will first require you to make a copy. So please make a copy, and then the copy that you make will be fully open for your own edits. For now, as you're doing this, I will also share exactly this template, and I'll walk you through it just very briefly. And so the very first point that I would invite you to do in this template is to think about the goal and try to think about what does it actually mean for you to be almost burnout resistant, right? How would you feel? How would you behave? How do you imagine that? How would you act? What would you think and believe, right? So let's start by imagining ourselves in our actual work, actually in this particular state. And with that mindset, I would invite you to go through each section of this template. As you can see, I've added the points that I mentioned in the presentation into the template, so you have them at hand. You don't need to go back to the presentation or to the recording. You can use them for further reference. Omar, please jump in. You have a question?
Sorry, Justyna, it's just that I have to go in a short while. Just want to ask you a few questions.
Okay.
First of all, thank you very much for bringing this very, very important topic. Many people simply don't have to they never talk about this. It's such a taboo topic. Yeah, I mean, you have the luxury of, leaving a job, taking a break. Your circumstances, how long did it get for you to, get back to, job again? How much time did it take for you? Second thing, what is the time when you should say, like, it's now time to actually, meet it? I say this because I teach at a university. You see a very, very troubling trend now that students have so much pressure on them. They've spent 4 years. They've got so much, a lot of expectations, student loans on them. Their parents take loans, as an investment. And then they don't own jobs, very, very poorly paid jobs. So they're very, very upset, very, very, you're seeing a lot of suicides. You're seeing a lot of, lots of depression. Chelsea over there. How do you intervene as a teacher? And what I've realized is that student services and all, they don't do a very good job. It's like putting tape over a room, essentially. I don't know. It's over to you, Justyna. I hope I've got my question across.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, thank you for asking, and thank you for sharing. These are extremely difficult things from my perspective. The first question, when you asked about how long does it take to recover, right? I can share with you two things. One is my personal experience, and when it comes to my personal experience, and note that I experienced that in 2019, right? My personal experience is that I've semi-recovered in a year. So I was okay in a year. But the actual consequences of that experience, I suffer still, in the sense that there are things that emotionally it's still difficult for me to calmly respond to some triggers, right? To some situations. There are still things that are, in a sense, haunting me from that period. So my personal experience is this: a year till I was okay. I was already working. I had to. But in terms of the actual consequences of full burnout, I still experience them. So that's why I'm so adamant to actually help people prevent it rather than go through it and have to recover, right? So that's that. Now, when it comes to intervening and seeking help, professional help, I'm of the belief that there is no too early. There's no such thing as too early, in the sense that even if it's a consultation with, I don't know, a psychologist, psychiatrist, a therapist, whoever is preferable in your context, even if that consultation ends up with the diagnosis that you're not yet burnt out or you're not at risk of depression or anxiety disorders, then it's just a reassurance and you're good. But more often than not, we're going to seek help way too late, when we're already depressed or when we're already burnt out or when we're already experiencing anxiety, severe anxiety, and so on and so forth. And I'm listing all of the, not all of them, but some of the disorders together with burnout, because also in the early stages, it's very difficult to tell what is it that is actually happening to me, right? What am I experiencing? Is it just tiredness? Is it depression? Am I just, I don't know, overworked, and that's why I'm being anxious and I don't sleep well, right? So it's very difficult to say. But that's why I encourage people to seek simple consultation, simple psychological consultation as soon as they get worried, right? Uh, the tricky part is that you cannot make anyone do it. They have to be willing and ready to do it, because even if you convince someone to seek consultation, seek professional help, and they are not convinced, they're just doing that to appease you, nothing will come out of it, because they will not be open, they will not be honest, they will not take it. So we can always encourage, we can always share practical ways how to do it. For many people, this is also a barrier. I don't know where to find a psychiatrist or a psychologist. I don't know how to make an appointment. I don't know how it costs, right? So providing this type of information-based help is also something that I encourage, but in no way we can actually, I don't want to say force, but really make someone seek help. So long story short, I think the earlier the better. Even if it's just to then say, okay, I'm good, I was just worried, right? And second, you cannot make anyone. So providing information, normalizing it, saying that's perfectly normal, just go and check like you would check any other thing, is something that we can do.
Thank
Does
you.
that answer?
It does address it. Thank you very much. Thank you for sharing your inner story. That's so brave of you. Amount, to share it. Uh, Feels, you feeling out, and when there's somebody do that. Thank you very much. Have a great day. Just move to things, right? Well, keep up the great work, this video.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Umar. And so returning to the template, you can see that in the instructions, you have the risk factors that you might want to explore. And I would encourage you to identify 2 or 3 from each of the sections that from your perspective are the highest risk for you, that might carry the heaviest weight when it comes to burnout, to stressors, to things that make your professional life especially taxing. And once you have them, please write them into this table. And for each of them, try to think about very specific, very practical ways in which you can counteract this risk, right? So to give you a quick example, if in the job demand section, you know that the amount of work that you have to do is just overwhelming, that it's too much, and everybody keeps adding to your plate, and it's just insane, then you might think of ways in which put a boundary. You can put a boundary and try to actually lower the number of things that you're doing. And it can be super practical. It can be, okay, I'll make a list of the things that I'm responsible for today, and I'll see which of them can be delegated and to whom, and I'll start the discussions. Or whenever someone tries to add to my list of tasks, I will first ask what they would like me to deprioritize from the current list of tasks that I'm doing, so that they also know and feel responsible for the amount of work that is to be done by yourself, right? So think about very practical ways in which you can counteract each of these risks. It's the same for job resources or for personal resources. Again, please try to be as practical as possible, but also at the end of the day, and it is also what Umar asked about, this is something that you can do as long as you're not too far along, if you know what I mean. If you're already worried that you're approaching burnout, that you're already experiencing all of these 4 elements, or maybe 3 of these main symptoms of burnout, if you're already experiencing some trouble sleeping or eating, do not wait. And please consult a therapist, psychiatrist, psychologist, whoever is available to you, and seek professional help. This is something that can help earlier in the process rather than later. And so with that, I want to wrap up this session with 2 more invitations. Of course, the template is now yours. As you've copied it, you can use it freely. You can also share it with others if you feel that's something that can support them as well. There are 2 more things that I wanted to invite you to. If you also want to seek some peer support and learn more about different things that contribute to mental health in the workplace. The first one is an online community that I'm currently creating and that I will be launching in February. This is going to be a community for professionals working on social change, environmental change, economic change, basically change makers of any kind, including researchers, including social business people or business people who feel that their work is focusing on making a difference, right, in the world. And so if that's something that would be interesting for you, please join the waitlist. Just sign up for it. I'm putting the link in the chat again, so that you can join the waitlist. And the second invitation that I have is for the next webinar in a month. I will be talking about basic psychological needs and what they are, how they translate into 2 different types of motivation, and then how that motivation turns into different levels of your performance, but also your well-being. So this is a webinar that will be focused on team contexts, but it doesn't require you to be a team leader. You can just be a member of a team to actually take something out of this webinar for yourself. And so with that, thank you so much for joining this session. Thank you so much for taking the time. And I'm looking very much forward to checking in with you in a month. Thank you so much.